Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
There's a great deal of caution that we saw all levels of government take with regard to the trucker convoy and the protests. And again, I think a lot of this has to do with politics.
It's overwhelming. The town is rather small. It's about 5,000 people, and the number of refugees is growing daily. So they're working very hard, the volunteers and the town.
Right away, as soon as you come in, you can see our need for storage. We're piling to the ceiling a lot of things just to make room.
Thanks for joining us. A group of experts at the University of Windsor spent the afternoon discussing the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge. The conversation focused on how the protest took place, how it was policed, and how it ended. CBC's Chris Ensing joins us now live in studio for more on this. Chris, you listened in. What stood out to you?
Yeah, Kat, it was a 3-hour discussion. I'm going to drop 3 points from it for us today. There was an interesting discussion about media, and this was non-traditional media like CBC, CTV, or the Windsor Star. It was people creating their own broadcasts that drew the focus. It was notable when we were out in the protest. Every other person seemed to have their own live stream going on some social media site. One expert says that it essentially turned into people broadcasting their participation, drawing more people in, and then drawing counter reactions from that. And that included the creation of a resistance movement.
Protesters, residents, counter-protesters, even remote audiences, all can now directly participate. Perhaps the most famous form of resistance from the recent blockade or convoy was the so-called Ram Ranch resistance, an attempt by counter-protesters to jam popular two-way communication channels on Zello by blasting an X-rated song called Ram Ranch. The media content produced from this form of resistance created its own secondary audience, entertained and mobilized by the seamless integration of politics and entertainment in one admittedly crude action.
So essentially saying there that the movement and counter movements fed off of themselves, off of each other. There was also an interesting point about who was responsible for ending the protest and what that took. One panelist suggesting that elected officials, they looked at this very much like a political issue, while private industry, like the Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association, who made the court injunction that ended the protest, they acted first.
You know, the relationships between sort of mass political mobilization versus the role that the private industry and the private sector takes, right? It ultimately seems like one narrative here is that it was the private sector that arguably pushed the state or filled the gap, if you will, of state governance initially, in part because so much was at stake. But again, the municipality, the Windsor region itself has so much to lose.
Now, the city has taken over the court case, but hasn't said how much that this has cost. Now, when we've asked, they haven't been forthcoming with information. Finally, Kat, there was the issue of race. One panelist at the end drove home a point about what this was like on the outside to watch. He didn't talk about what would have happened if this was a protest of hundreds of black people, but said the idea of hundreds of black people blocking the bridge was something he couldn't even imagine because of his understanding of how black people are policed.
There's not even an ability to see ourselves doing that. Whether what was happening on the bridge or downtown Ottawa is right or wrong, I'm not here to talk about, you know, kind of the normative dimension of what happened. A lot of folks have already opined on that. I'm just talking about what if the protesters looked like me, what would the response be? And I'm saying I can't even imagine that.
I said that came after a number of discussions with colleagues and friends. A quick note on the actual blockade now. The province has announced a multi-million-dollar compensation package for businesses that suffered losses during the protest in February, but that's specifically for Ottawa. I've been asking all week about what we're going to see here in Windsor. The Ministry of Finance hasn't provided any details. Kat.
Thanks, Chris. CBC's Chris Ensing live in studio for us tonight. Russia continues its push into Ukraine with more attacks, missiles, and shelling. Tensions have hit a new high as Russian forces attacked and captured a major nuclear power facility. And at the same time, the humanitarian crisis is growing, and Ukrainians are streaming out of the country. CBC's Julia Wong has the latest.
Shelling rumbles in eastern Kyiv during Russian attacks. Warehouses here now flattened as dark smoke billows above the destruction. In this town in the north, buildings destroyed by airstrikes, lives forever changed.
My parents live right here, nearby. It's hard for me to speak. This is a nightmare.
Russian troops continued their advance towards the capital, the line of tanks and armored vehicles stretching for more than 60 kilometers. And on Friday, the view in daylight after Russia seized Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The attack sparked fire, radiation concerns, though no damage was detected, and widespread condemnation.
It could have been 6 Chernobyls. They were shelling this at close range. This was terror at a new level.
The southern city of Mariupol has been surrounded for days by Russian troops. Its mayor says it's been depleted of water, heat, and electricity, and it's running out of food. The humanitarian situation there is tense, says this advisor to President Zelensky. As the international community rallies together, Russian President Vladimir Putin fired warnings at neighboring countries. There are no bad intentions towards our neighbors, as we've said, and I would also advise them not to escalate the situation, not to introduce any restrictions, he says. Back in Ukraine, many wait for hours to board trains for safe passage out of the country.
We can't sleep, we can't eat normally because terrible pain, anxious because of everything.
Overall, more than 1 million people are believed to have left Ukraine, a number only expected to grow. The humanitarian crisis is also spilling across oceans. Tearful scenes of reunion after this group of mainly Mexican citizens landed in Mexico Friday, a more than 20-hour journey from Ukraine that had some grappling with their emotions.
But it's just hard to think about your own safety when your family is there.
Safe passage, but no real escape from a war that continues to affect so many. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
NATO says it doesn't want to take any steps that would escalate an already horrific conflict unfolding in Eastern Europe. It comes as a desperately outgunned nation, pummeled by Russian airstrikes and ground assault, repeats its calls to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Salima Shifji dives into the reasoning behind the Western reticence.
What's your message to the people of Ukraine?
Extraordinary was how this meeting was billed as NATO struggles to calibrate its response to an all-out war.
Over here?
Minister after minister filed in and tried to put words to a conflict that keeps escalating.
The world is changing under our eyes, and we need to be prepared.
That's the moment to speak out and to stand up.
That is the only way to make sure that this madness stops.
The message that NATO members are moving in lockstep to counter Russia's aggression.
The undercurrent leading into this meeting was a big ask from Ukraine's president, an emotional plea repeated day after day, that NATO step up and declare a no-fly zone over the country.
How many of us need to be blown up, how many legs and arms torn off, until you finally implement a no-fly zone, Volodymyr Zelensky cries. That frustration is also evident outside the meeting, the calls for more action hard to silence. But NATO is in a bind, horrified by the destruction, convinced it will get worse in the coming days. And yet NATO is not about to get directly involved.
Allies agree that we should not have NATO planes operating over Ukrainian airspace or NATO troops on Ukrainian territory.
The risk it would create a global war, pulling in more countries, harming more civilians.
They're sheltering. They're shelling around them.
Canada's foreign affairs minister understands the emotional ask from Ukraine's leaders, but she says NATO members have to tread carefully.
Our red line is not to start an international conflict. We need to make sure that we do everything possible without crossing that red line.
And so the plan is to stick to the plan. Weapons and more flown into Ukraine, but NATO troops sent to bolster the eastern flank, not crossing the border, as Ukrainians try desperately to fight back the Russians. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Brussels.
And the Prime Minister has announced he is headed to Europe this weekend. Justin Trudeau will be meeting with allies to discuss the war in Ukraine and other matters.
I'll be traveling to the United Kingdom, to Latvia, to Germany and Poland to meet with partners and allies. We'll of course be discussing how to continue to support Ukraine, how to strengthen democratic values around the world, and how to stand up even more for democracy, to stand against Russian aggression, and to work very hard on combating the kind of disinformation and misinformation that we know is a facet of day-to-day life these days, but a particularly strong facet of this conflict, this war in Ukraine.
The Canadian military is leading an international battle group in Latvia, and Trudeau will also talk with leaders about economic recovery and fighting climate change. And many in Windsor are rallying to support those in Ukraine. The Polish Club is having a fundraiser tomorrow to help.
We have decided to have a pasta dinner fundraiser to support Ukraine this coming Saturday from 12 to 6, simply because we cannot be on a sideline. We decided to take part. Because we can, we decided to do something special. Help a small town in Poland called Lubycza Królewska, which is also a town that is on the border with the Ukraine.
She says the town is very small, about 5,000 people, and everyone there is working to make sure basic needs like shelter are met. Meanwhile, a local dentist office is showing its love for Ukraine as well.
Where to come from? I was thinking about this. I'm a proud Canadian, and I love what the government of Canada has done, stood with all the other nations, but it's all about the Ukrainians. It's all about peace, and it's all about Putin. You know, we're angry. We're sad. We're angry at Putin, who has literally taken the world and is strangling it. And we're sad for the Ukrainian people. As I said, Putin can kiss my maple leaf.
There is that sign, and he says his patients love the sign. In other local news, Street Help has been running out of space, a problem because they have to store food and clothing in order to help those in need. But now storage containers are being added to the property, which the group says will be a big help.
Right away, as soon as you come in, you can see our need for storage. We're piling to the ceiling a lot of things just to make room. But the problem is, it causes too much confusion, and we really need to simplify what we're doing here. I don't have room to put the center shelves because there was so much, we are binning it. And we're sharing what we can with other charities that need some, but still, in order to share it, we have to sort it. And we don't have a big warehouse, and that's a necessity. With the shipping containers, you have to be careful not to put in liquids, food items, different things. But there are different products in here that we could put in storage. What we can't, we have to keep in.
What kind of difference is having these shipping containers going to make in all this?
Oh, certainly it will consolidate certain things. No champion products, for example, or all maybe along the left side of one of the storage units. Some other specific product, you know, it could be a real genuine staging area. This goes here, this goes here, this goes here.
What we don't use every day on a shelf inside a storage unit, that would make a lot more sense. When I need it, I can go out and find it.
Area businesses are partnering with a local organization to collect feminine hygiene products throughout the month of March.
So this weekend will be the first time that we have a charity She Support Drive, which is perfect because they are basically really in line with what our values of the store is. So I'm really glad to help them and support them out.
Wolf and Rebel will be collecting donations tomorrow. The initiative, started by She Support, is looking to help women in the local shelter system. They're looking for deodorant, shampoo, and menstrual products. Let's take a live look outside there. We've had a beautiful day today, and the weekend is also looking pretty good, at least the Saturday, as we've got double digits on the way, although it will be a wet one on Sunday. Nick Sturkovich will be here after the break with a look at your weekend forecast. Welcome back. The 2022 Winter Paralympics officially opened following last month's Beijing Winter Olympics. But it's taking place in a world dramatically changed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Ukraine.
The Ukrainian delegation was met with loud cheers of support during the Parade of Nations. The president of the International Paralympic Committee called for peace in his opening ceremony speech. Russian and Belarusian athletes are barred from competition because of their government's role in the war. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he supported the IPC's decision. Team Canada consists of 49 athletes, including 4 guides. A total of 564 athletes will compete in 78 medal events at the Games, which will wrap up on March 13th. If you're waiting patiently for longer days and more sunshine, you are not the only one. Plants are missing that full spectrum light too. Garden expert Rob Sproul explains what people can do to give indoor plants the light they need.
Isn't this a beautiful sight? Seedlings are one of the great promises of spring. I love seeing them come up. You can have them come up in your own home, but you might need a little extra light because it's the dark frozen tundra out there. So I'm Robert Salisbury, and today we're talking about growing under lights. I have an idea. When I was a kid, we used to use these in the greenhouse with pie plates around them as grow lights. So this guy is an old school, hot as heck, super energy and efficient incandescent bulb. If you still have them, you can use them as grow lights. Remember, now they're only blue spectrum, okay? So they don't give you the full spectrum of light, so you're not going to be able to have anything with fruit. So leafy greens and herbs only. They are quite hot, so keep your plants about 18 inches away. And if you use these guys, make sure to do it safely. This is a standard fluorescent tube you use in your home or office store. It's not made for grow lights. You can use these, but again, blue spectrum only. So spinach, lettuce, salad greens, herbs, that's about it. Nothing with fruit or flowers. All right, but it is cooler than an incandescent bulb, probably easier to get these days, and it's going to last a whole lot longer. Now we get into grow lights that are actually grow lights. Full spectrum LED, they're made for this. Hook them up to a timer for about 16 hours. You put them over like that, you can get a different assemblies or what have you, and you can do cherry tomatoes, anything with flowers and fruit really. You can get a head start on spring to put things outside, or just enjoy them inside. Happy spring.
Nick Sturkovich joins us now for a look at our weather forecast. Nick, like some of those plants that we just saw, many of us are just trying to find ways to survive until spring officially hits. So tell us, what do we have in store over the next few days?
Yeah, it's going to be a mixed bag of weather over the next few days. But we're going to start with the positive. Today, you know, not too bad. I mean, a little bit below seasonal, but with some sunshine. Felt pretty nice out there. Heading into the weekend, we've got double-digit temperatures, but then a big shift in our weather pattern for Monday. All of this coming up right now. Here's where we're sitting. 0 degrees in Windsor at this point. With the winds, feels like -3. Not much of a wind chill out there tonight. A little bit of high cloud cover just pushing across the region. That's really about it. As we move through the long-range forecast, though, lots going on. So tonight into tomorrow, generally this is high cloud cover. We'll see a mix of sun and cloud for tomorrow. Some sunny breaks in there, but I think we will see sort of this sheet of kind of high cloud cover through the day tomorrow. Some sunnier breaks toward the afternoon, even the risk of some spotty showers late day on Saturday, and then Sunday, so early Sunday morning, we've got this line moving through. And what we're in here for sort of Saturday night into Sunday is the warm sector of the system, which is why we're actually going to see some nice double-digit temperatures. Overnight showers, even the risk of a rumble of thunder there. Then as we head through Sunday night, we get some sort of clearing breaks and cooler weather moving in. And watch this for Sunday morning, or rather Monday morning and afternoon. Snow. So a big shift in the weather pattern coming up as we move from Sunday, double-digit temperatures, to Monday, potential for accumulating snowfall here. How much? This model here showing about 5 centimeters of snow for the Windsor area. The model's a little undecided. Could see some mixing there with some rain, but the potential here for some accumulating snow. Winds are also going to be the factor. Now tomorrow, wind gusts up to about 40 or 50 kilometers per hour. But for Sunday, this is the one to watch. Look at this. North shores of Lake Erie could see wind gusts 80, 90 kilometers per hour coming out of the south. So this is the one to watch as we move through Sunday. Very windy conditions. Potential for some wind warnings as well. Overnight tonight, temperatures down to -4, -5 degrees, wind chills of about -9 to -12. Double digits for the next couple of days. Then that sort of messy mix of snow, maybe some freezing rain in there, and sort of seasonal temperatures up and down. Like it.
Nick, when you said snow earlier,
I don't believe it.
all I could think was, did he say snow? Like, how are we going from double digits?
I know. Oh
my gosh.
No, when I saw it too, I'm telling you, I'm going, what? Anyway.
The roller coaster ride continues.
It's March.
Thank you so much, Nick.
You bet.
When we come back, Indigenous people in Canada are showing their support for Ukraine. We're going to tell you how. Stay with us.
CBC Listen app.
A suicide bombing at a mosque in Pakistan during Friday prayers has left at least 56 dead and has wounded more than 190 people. It happened when the Shia mosque in the northwestern city of Peshawar was packed with worshippers. Authorities say the attacker opened fire on police stationed outside before rushing in and detonating an explosive device strapped to his body. The minority Shia Muslims have been a frequent target of deadly attacks in the Sunni majority nation. While no militant group has claimed today's bombing, ISIS and the Pakistani Taliban, they have been involved in past incidents in the area. Many Indigenous people are showing their support for Ukraine by wearing what are known as kukum scarves. These bright, colorful granny hankies also highlight a historic connection they share with Ukrainians who first settled in Canada. Hillary Bird explains.
There's the scarf.
When Natasha Peter touches the vibrant floral blooms in her designs, she thinks of her grandmother.
It's like putting part of my grandparents into my artwork.
But now the Yukon fashion designer also thinks about Ukraine.
Very sad what's going on over there.
She's one of many Indigenous people across the country sporting what they call a granny hanky or kukum scarf in solidarity with Ukraine.
You're in my thoughts and prayers, Ukraine.
It began with this TikTok video highlighting the often forgotten connection between Indigenous Canadians and Ukrainians.
Because if you have a kukum scarf, put it on, wear it.
It's a relationship that goes back more than 100 years. In the early 20th century, thousands of Ukrainians immigrated to Western Canada. Struggling to survive and facing persecution from the Canadian government, the settlers turned to their Indigenous neighbors.
Our people, the Indigenous people, would teach about the land and also take early Ukrainians on hunting trips.
As the relationship grew, so too did trade. The floral beadwork of the Cree, Ojibwe, and Dene traded for the vibrant blooming stitchwork in the scarves of Ukrainian grandmothers known as babushkas that have adorned the heads and necks of matriarchs for the last century.
When I see the granny hanky, it just represents the strength of the women in my family.
It's the same strength and resiliency designer Vashti Etzel now sees in Ukraine.
I think it's quite touching that, we Indigenous people are showing our support this way because there's that connection that we have with the Ukraine. It's our way of keeping them in our prayers during this very difficult time.
They just hope people in Ukraine are hearing their prayers and feeling their kinship through these beautiful scarves. Hillary Bird, CBC News, Yellowknife.
That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night and a wonderful weekend.